Welcome to the Lead with Your Soul podcast. I'm Michelle Wright, your host and fellow traveler on this journey of self-discovery. This podcast is designed for women navigating life transitions and yearning to embrace their true selves. I'll be sharing my personal journey from navigating the complexities of divorce and blending families to reshaping my career to something that resonates with my soul. With 3 decades as a teacher and mentor, I'm here to share insights, heartfelt stories, and practical strategies. Together, we'll explore how to cultivate self-love and create the vibrant, fulfilling life you deserve. Join me each week as we dive deep into the art of living authentically.
In this episode, we discuss mental health, challenges, and mention suicide. Wanted to let you know this in case this is a trigger warning for you. And if you or your loved one needs help, please call a crisis line. There is a suicide and crisis lifeline at 988, and you can reach out to them for immediate support or explore the number in your geographical area. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Lead with Your Soul podcast. I'm Michelle Wright, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. And today, I have a very special guest close to my heart, my daughter, Jayna. Welcome, Jayna.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Jayna and I were talking before we even started, and we recognized we had so many things we could talk about. We could talk about our cards and all of our spirituality because we have that in common. We could talk about the divine feminine and just women's rights in the world and patriarchy. Instead, we wanted to bring something very close to our hearts and talk about mental health and speak about it in a perspective from the parental perspective and the journey from Jayna's perspective. And our goal is really, no matter how you come at this from a loved one, or if you're journeying supporting someone, or you're journeying yourself through mental health, we're hoping that our stories can let you know that you're not alone and that you're loved and supported, and help you find different supports wherever you are. Hey, Jayna, I'm so glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm Michelle's daughter. I'm 28 years old and I'm a nurse by profession. So I've been working in healthcare for the last 5 years. I live with my partner and my beautiful cat, Juno. We love hiking and skiing and camping, pretty much anything outdoors. I love yoga and, like Michelle said, very spiritual. Yeah, I love all of that woo-woo stuff. I enjoy writing and journaling, and I love writing poetry and reading poetry. And yeah, so I guess in terms of my mental health journey, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 2.5 years ago now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think my symptoms did start quite early in life, but it took a long time to get where I am today and just heal along the way.
Yeah. And it did, like when you say it took a long time. And I think the challenge is there were so many things happening, right? Like I look at 12, you lost your mom, which impacted you and your entire family and really changed you and changed the supports around you. And then we blended when you were 16. So that's another huge shift. And it's so hard, I think, really understanding what parts were part of trauma of losing your mom, what parts are the difficulties and emotional aspects of blending and the transitions of family, and then what parts were your own journey in mental health. And that is just so challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And like when we talk about causes of things like this, there's
Yeah.
just so many factors and they still don't really know. But ultimately, it's like epigenetics. So you can have any sort of predisposition genetically, especially with bipolar disorder, but it often it doesn't come up in your life unless you do go through traumas. And so I think it's always a combination of the two. It's like nature and nurture, but with mental health, I think it's just both. Obviously, some of the difficult experiences early in life would have changed my brain chemistry and probably contributed to just mental health challenges.
And that makes sense. And I think they just know so little. And I think it was during COVID, we saw a huge spotlight and more positive approach towards mental health. It's taken a long time for mental health to really move into a place that people can speak about it without it being a stigma. And I know that in our story, like even because you talked about a genetic aspect, and it was really hard because it's like there's no mental health in the family. And yet, as we go further down, we find this out, oh, where there has been. So people just have never shared it.
And I think that's what can make diagnosis so difficult, especially with genetic disorders, whether it's bipolar or schizophrenia. Every single doctor that I encountered did ask me, do you have a family history of mental illness? And I just always said no, because I truly didn't know about it. And it's not something that our family ever talked about. And even one generation ago, it was viewed so differently. And there were members of our family that were estranged from the family, and it wasn't recognized as a mental health condition at the time. So that's a huge barrier for diagnosis, actually. Because if my doctors had known like earlier, oh yes, like we had depression and alcoholism and schizophrenia in the family, that would have completely changed like the trajectory of me actually getting diagnosed correctly.
Oh, and I would agree. I even look, so as parents supporting you. And I think we own that we had a huge learning curve to take on this journey. Because in the beginning, what is that difference between feeling anxious, feeling sad, and it being a mental health diagnosis? So I can remember you were feeling suicidal, you're in university, and your dad and I are talking with you and we're giving you advice. Just choose to feel happy, just choose to do something different. And there really is that piece of there's a difference from feeling blue and having a clinical diagnosis. And I know we've talked about that from a perspective of even using the vocabulary just so loosely in our lives, but also recognizing when it is more serious. So you've done some of I say lower level ways to make yourself feel happy or to feel better, and it's not working. And then it moves from just a feeling to potentially a clinical diagnosis. I threw a lot in there on you, Jayna.
No, I think there's a lot that I could speak about that. Yeah, and it's something that like we had been talking about like outside of the podcast, but it is challenging because I think there are two sides to the coin. And the first side is that we are talking about mental health like more and more in our society, and it's slowly becoming destigmatized. I think a lot of stigma is still there, but there is more of an open dialogue now. And that is so great to bring awareness and for people to be able to seek the help that they need without feeling as judged. And there's just more education around it, which is amazing. But on the flip side of that coin, I think the language that we use around mental health it's normalized a lot of things. So like when people say, oh, this negative situation is making me depressed, or I have so much anxiety, he's so ADHD, or you go over to a friend's house and it's very neat and tidy and they're just saying, yeah, I'm a little bit OCD, or that experience, oh, that gave me PTSD. I think it's just being used in situations where it shouldn't be all the time. And obviously there is a wide spectrum of like depression, anxiety. It's a spectrum. There's no cut and clear definition like our current mental health system makes it out to be, like with the DSM, for example.
So just what is the DSM?
Oh, yeah. So it's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders. And it's basically like the Bible of what doctors and psychiatrists use to establish the criteria in order to meet a specific diagnosis. And so if you have 3 out of 7 criteria for depression, then it can be considered a clinical diagnosis. But it's just I'm not sure how helpful it is, because I do know that from my perspective, mental health and mental illness is just on this spectrum. It's like autism. Like, you can have mild cases of anxiety and depression that last a few months, like after a negative life experience, for example. But then there's also the clinical diagnosis where there's nothing really negative that has happened in your life. There's no reason for it, but it's just like chronic. It's ongoing. It's lifelong. So I just think it's important to differentiate those two things, because I've found that with the overuse of that language, it's almost normalizing it and almost invalidating the actual clinical diagnoses. Because like true depression, where you're catatonic, you cannot talk, you cannot move, that's a little bit different than feeling sad. And so we're using them interchangeably, but I just think, yeah, it's a little bit invalidating as someone that actually has been hospitalized for like psychosis, and then there are people that are using the word psychotic just as a word to use to describe something. So yeah, it's just a challenge.
It is. It's a good perspective, I think. I think we quite quickly started to realize, because I think describing feeling overwhelmed or describe feeling really busy when things are going on, lots of times I know my language would be, oh, I just feel so crazy. And not that you can't use that. It's just being aware, and aware what you're actually saying and how you're saying it, what that means to someone who might be struggling with how their mind is working and how they're thinking.
And it just confuses the true definitions. And so I think for me, it made it seem like it wasn't as big of a deal as it was. And I think it was the same for my loved ones. When I said, oh, I'm depressed, it was seen as more of something that would be fixable if I just tried to like think positively or exercise or do these things. And so it led to a lot of, it was like normalized. So I felt like it wasn't a big deal. And I felt like it was something that I had to get over and that I had to deal with alone. And if I had known what I know now, like I think I would have sought help a lot earlier in a lot of these cases. But I just felt like, oh, it's just depressed. Like I just feel depressed or anxious. Like it's up to me to change my thinking. And I began to really feel like it was my fault when those little interventions weren't working.
That it makes sense. And then I think that next year that we came, we actually brought you for support. And that's where you talk about it can be very challenging, especially as a young woman, getting help, in the sense of, as a female, they can see it as just, oh, you're a female who's very emotional, and diminish that as well. So as you try different things, it is hard. Like there's a lot of things pushing against getting to a clear diagnosis.
For sure. And I think the problem with seeking help is it's so hard to do in the first place. And I know the very first time that I even considered seeking help was when I called you guys. I remember calling you guys from my car when I was in my second year of university. And I said, I feel suicidal. And that alone was such a hard step for me to take because I did not want to be a burden. And that's literally one of the symptoms of depression is you feel like you are a complete burden, that no one really cares, no one really loves you, a lot of self-blame. So just taking that step of even calling you guys and saying, this is what I'm feeling, was very hard to do. But I needed you to help me start that process of, okay, we need to seek some supports. And so that was like the start of my encounters, I guess, with the mental health care system. And we had just gone to the university health center, I think. And I was connected with a doctor, I was connected with a therapist, and put on medications at the time. But it is often seen, especially in a young woman, it's often labeled as, oh, like she's so sensitive and she has a lot of anxiety, but it could just be hormonal, like it could just be like she's being dramatic. So it's often labeled as all these things, and there's just stereotypes that exist. And my biggest feeling over the course of trying to seek treatment all these years was that I wasn't being believed. Like, that I just felt like I wasn't being believed in tell my story. And it was just kind of constantly diminished by healthcare professionals because they knew I was under a lot of stress. I was in nursing school. It's your early 20s. Like, everyone's going through a lot at that time in their life. Transitions, changes. So yeah, I mean, it was often just labeled as anxiety and an adjustment disorder. And of course, when you're young, like, you just listen to whatever the doctors tell you. Like, you trust them. So I was prescribed antidepressants. And yeah, for years and years, I was just on antidepressants. Now I know that antidepressants actually worsen symptoms of bipolar. They can cause rapid cycling. And so it's just crazy to me that like I was on antidepressants for 5 years. And they just kept increasing my dose again and again because I said, this is not working for me. But they would just increase the dose. And so I was on high doses of antidepressants and it was making me worse. And I started to really believe that it was my fault at that time because I had tried to seek help. I had gotten help. I had been put on medication. I had been doing therapy, but it wasn't working. And so I just really started to feel like I'm the problem. And so it caused a lot of, just self-blame, low self-worth. I thought it was my fault. So yeah, it was really challenging, especially initially.
I know as parents, we were really challenged and did not always respond in the best way. I think some of the best things we did was with one therapist you had, they offered parent groups. And then they suggested, here are some really good books. So I think one thing I'd like to do is add to this podcast some books that would be really good, or even podcasts you have listened to.
Yeah, totally.
Because educating ourselves on how to support you, one of 4 children. So that's the thing as a parent, right? You have 4 children. So you recognize you have to parent different. And we really recognized with you. And in that group, we're taught how to support you and help you in a very different way. And I think also there was 3 boys and you. So it just, that idea of an emotional woman also fell even more because of 3 males and a girl. You were the oldest, so going through your 20s before everybody else is going through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But if I were to say anything as a parent, the greatest gift we did was taking that, talking about it, and working with the psychologist on how to support you and how to create it. Because a big difference from a parent was it wasn't about us. And that was a huge piece that we personally, your dad and I, had to let go. It wasn't about us. This was not about our lack of parenting. This was not about the blending or it wasn't about that. This was about your mental health journey and how did we support you through that and focus on you in a very specific way that would help you to feel empowered. And they gave us several books and just helped us through the process again and again. And we signed up for several group sessions because they went 8 weeks. So we were able to talk in real time and bring this back and get mentored on real life situations, saying this happened, this is how we responded. And the psychologist was really good in saying, okay, I can see why you would have responded that way, but this is how it's not helping Jayna. And that was a key piece for us as parents to just journey along with you then, recognizing we're on this new journey. And I don't know if you felt a difference as we took those courses in how we responded. Like it seemed to, at that point, really shift in how we parented and we're trying to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a loved one, that is probably the best thing that you can do if you're wanting to support someone that's experiencing mental health challenges, like mainly because it's so misunderstood. And as someone that's going through it, my main feeling was that I was not understood. And I wasn't. Like, I didn't have anyone in my social circle that understood what was happening. And to be fair, I still don't. People don't fully understand what I've gone through and what I go through on a daily basis. But I think learning as much as you can and just, yeah, educating yourself, just even for me, like watching you guys put in the time and effort to try to learn, try to understand, like that meant everything to me because that's how I felt like you cared. Yeah, so I think it's just super valuable because there is a lot of misunderstanding. And even when we talk about the language that's used, like the definition of depression, the definition of anxiety, even the definition of bipolar, it's misconstrued because of how it's used in our everyday lives. So, and even for me, like I didn't know that much about, I guess I knew more. Like when I was in university, I started to learn more, but I didn't recognize it in myself. And so it's funny because when you're in it, you don't have the insight to recognize that, oh, these are actually symptoms of depression, or these are actually symptoms of mania. I didn't know. Like, it's just, I'd lived like this my whole life. I didn't know that it was not necessarily normal. I didn't understand why it was happening. And with all the different diagnoses I received over that 5-6 year span, it became really confusing. And I started to not believe anyone. Like, I started to lose trust in the doctors, the psychologists, just the health system. I started to lose trust and I began to not believe what they were telling me because I was getting so many different things thrown at me. First, oh, it's anxiety and it's social anxiety. And then next it's depression. And then it was borderline personality disorder. And then finally, bipolar disorder. But by the time I reached my bipolar diagnosis, I truly I didn't believe it because I was like, you know what? They've messed up this so many times that I don't know what to think anymore. So it's another barrier for people, I think.
And you're really educated, like being a nurse, you've actually taken courses on this. And I have other friends or loved ones who have gone through similar parts afterwards, getting diagnosed and even finding the right medications. I think that's what I found so interesting is we have the psychiatrist at this point, and I would think, oh, just get to a psychiatrist. If you can get to the psychiatrist, then you can get the answers. And I just remember you coming back from so many appointments and just being frustrated because you were at a point where you actually didn't feel confident in if you were feeling quote unquote normal or stable, or is this how I'm supposed to be feeling? Because you just had been off for so many years. And the amount of drugs you were to be taking or not taking in those 5-10 minute, so that was another thing, it was quick 5-10 minutes appointment. How are you feeling? Do you think we should increase this medication or decrease this medication? And you would get so frustrated because you're like, I am the one who is least able to make this diagnosis, this recommendation. And yet, if I say yes, it's going to happen and I'm going on more medication. If I say no, it might not be what I need and I'm going on less medication. And you just got so frustrated with that part of the system as well, that you were actually in so many ways calling these shots from a perspective where you didn't understand where you were.
Yeah. And I think it's really frustrating, first of all, to when you see your psychiatrist, for example, the appointments are 5 to 10 minutes max. And you see them maybe every 6 months sometimes. So when you're presenting specifically with bipolar that hasn't been diagnosed, they're only seeing your mood state for those 5 minutes. And maybe that day I'm stable, but maybe the week after I'm going to crash into depression, or maybe I'm going to be like manic. Like, they just don't get an idea of what your entire mood state is if they only have 5 minutes to assess you. And it's really difficult because whenever you're accessing care, like whether it's just seeing your doctor or even going to the emergency department, I felt so much pressure because I knew that their entire treatment plan was going to be based on what I told them. And that's a lot of pressure when you're in the midst of a crisis, because you cannot articulate, like you can't communicate effectively or describe what's going on, because you're literally like, you're mentally not, your brain's not working. And so it should almost be treated as if I have advanced depression, like I'm in crisis, I'm feeling suicidal when I go to the ER, I shouldn't be the one calling the shots because my brain is not working. Like, I do not have good memory, good concentration. My perception of reality is completely warped. And it should be treated as almost as if someone that has dementia that can't advocate for themselves at that time, because you can't. You can't advocate for yourself when you're in the midst of that. And so that's just another barrier to actually getting the proper care that you need. And I think that's where loved ones come in. Like, it is really important to have someone in your life that knows you and has been consistently like with you, monitoring you for a while, because from an objective point of view, you're able to see things that I wouldn't be able to see in myself, like at the time. But yeah, it's frustrating for sure. And I think just the way our entire mental health care system is now, it's not super conducive to like getting proper treatment. And I know like over the years, like I was hospitalized quite a few times, and near the end, like I just had zero trust, honestly, in the system, because nothing had worked. I had tried again and again. I felt like I had put in effort to seek help and nothing was working. And the people that I met in those settings said the same thing. They did not trust the system. And so eventually, if you don't trust the people that are supposed to be caring for you, you stop seeking treatment altogether. And it's just really sad and unfortunate what it's come to. But yeah, like even just getting to the point of the proper diagnosis for me, it took over 5 years. And that's actually on the low end of things. Like, the average timeline for people actually getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder is 5 to 10 years from their first encounter seeking help. So it's not even from the first symptoms, it's from the first time they're in crisis. It can take 10 years, and that is just mind-boggling to me. It's just unfortunate that people have to suffer for 5 to 10 years, and I truly feel like I lost years of my life to being in those mood states where I didn't want to be alive. And it's just so sad to me that I feel like I lost part of my life when I could have been treated earlier and had that quality of life.
Yeah. It was a very difficult journey for you. We observed it. And just as parents loving you, I remember having a lot of discussion around, our only hope for you is that you can stay alive, right? And it was a really challenging and hard time. And I think it is difficult. I think it's important to recognize that we're in Alberta and that each province in Canada has a different health system. So every place you go, and you did encounter that because you moved up to the Yukon, every system is slightly different. So when you move, you lose your history.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I look, one of the ways that I found that you did start to advocate for yourself, start to change, is by being meticulous in writing down where you were when you were able to. Just trying to keep a daily journal and recognize out of 10, I believe it was, or it might have been out of 5, where you were on every day, just to start recognizing your emotions and where they were at. Was that part of what helped you?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to your point about like my history not being carried over, I think that was also a huge barrier in terms of me actually getting to the right treatment, because I did move so many times, and largely due to the mania states that I was in. I would make major life changes. Like I would get a new job, I would move to a new city. And that was a barrier in terms of actually getting the right treatment, because in Alberta, it's actually better because we just have one like health authority, like we have AHS. So our records are kept throughout the province. But I was living in BC at the time, and they have 6 different health authorities, and none of them talk to each other. So my history was never transferred over, and I had to start from scratch every single time. And like, it does get extremely exhausting telling your story again and again to all these different strangers that you don't have a therapeutic relationship with. So it's hard for it to be accurate because there is that shame and you don't trust them. So yeah, that's a whole issue in and of itself. But in terms of, sorry, what was the other part of your question?
It was just recognizing how you started to take some power back. And part of it was recognizing, okay, I need to track what's going on with my feelings so that I can communicate, I can understand them personally, but also recognizing it was so important to communicate that then to the healthcare providers you were working with.
Yeah. No, that was huge. And so I did start tracking my moods. I think initially, yeah, it was like using a scale of 1 to 10 every day. And then when I recognized that I had been having like periods of very high mood states, and I think it was when I was actually finally diagnosed with bipolar, but I made a timeline over the course of the last 5-6 years that I've been having these symptoms. And I just recognized all these patterns. It would basically be that generally in the summers, spring and summer, I would have a very elevated mood. I wouldn't be sleeping as much. I would be just doing a lot of activity. I would be feeling very happy, very euphoric, some risky behavior. And then in the fall and winter, I would crash into depression. And so it was actually it was very eye-opening to recognize that had been my life And I had no idea when I was in it. Like, I didn't have the insight to recognize that's what was happening. I didn't realize the patterns, but a lot of my life decisions make more sense now in that context. And so I started just tracking my mood every single day. And actually now I have an app on my phone where I just like rate, this is my highest mood of the day, this is my lowest mood of the day. Was I taking my meds today? Did I have therapy? Did I exercise? All these things. So it just tracks. And it's super valuable because I do only see my psychiatrist like every 5 or 6 months. And it's really helped because I now have 6 months of my mood tracked on my phone. I can refer to that or I can show him that. And it's just way more helpful because obviously he can only see you presenting in the state that you're in at that moment. So yeah, I think it is important to take ownership over your own health with anything and do as much research as you can too. I know I started doing a lot of my own research. Initially, a lot of the doctors did ask, what do you want to do? What meds are you wanting? And I just didn't know. I wasn't in a place where I should be the one making that decision. But as I learned more and improved, I did start doing a lot of research. I remember I was admitted at one point, and I remember the psychiatrist saying, I'm going to write down your options. These are the options that you can go on in terms of medications. You can read about them, research them, and then tomorrow you're going to tell me which one you want. And that was more helpful to me because I had the time to look into it. I learned so much, and then I was able to make an informed decision. And I think that's the difference. Earlier in my journey, I wasn't informed at all. Like, I didn't know all these medications. I had no idea. But as I matured and got older and had tried many different medications, I started to get a pretty good grasp of what I wanted. And so I was able to take more ownership over my care. And that feels very empowering for sure. So I think not only should your loved ones be learning and trying to understand, but also you for yourself need to really get a good grasp of what's happening to you and the treatment options that are available. And like, I think that makes all the difference because everyone's different. And some meds work for some people, some don't work at all. And there's just so much trial and error. Like, you have to try different combinations, different dosages. So it takes a long time. And like, even after my diagnosis, that's not the end of the road. I still have to now change all my meds and then try to figure out what's going to work. So yeah, it's just it's a constant journey and it's ongoing.
It is. And even just as you were speaking, I'm just going to capture a couple of things. Like, you were talking about summers were good when you were early in. And what's interesting is that's exactly the year that the school year, right, is from September to May. So that's when you would get depressed, fall into more depression, which is also school and just really focused. And then in the summer when you were working, and that's when it was easier for you. And that's where I think it is so difficult because there's so many factors that can impact, because it was easy to make some of those, like yourself, ourselves, and the doctors. You can see it's hard because it's the cycle of the year. Not even once did bipolar come up until later, which was interesting. And just capturing how you empowered yourself, like where you empowered yourself by now taking control of your own data so that you could communicate that. And it was for your own, for everybody else around you, but also for your team to be informed. Where did you find not everybody's a nurse. So where would you tell people to go? Where did you find the information that you needed that was reliable information to help make some of your decisions?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I essentially diagnosed myself in the end, but it's only because I had that nursing background. And it's funny that it took me so long to recognize. Mind you, I think over the course of the illness, it does worsen. So the episodes would worsen with each year. But I remember vividly one summer, like the summer of 2022, we were at our family cabin. And I remember saying the words, I feel uncomfortably happy right now. Like it was anxiety, like I was feeling so elevated that I was actually uncomfortable. And then many months later, I think the following spring, I just started to recognize it in myself. Like I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up at 3 a.m. to work on all these creative projects. I was then going to work and I felt a sense of grandiosity at work. I was working very fast. I just had a lot of self-confidence and I was telling jokes, being very social, just all these things. And it was different than my normal personality. Like I'm a pretty reserved person. So I just made a list of things that I had noticed and I recognized that these are the symptoms of mania. I remember learning about it in school. So I took that information to my psychologist at the time and she immediately said, this is bipolar and you need to get on a mood stabilizer. So yeah, it was not a self-diagnosis. Like we don't encourage self-diagnoses, but if you're very aware of yourself and are tracking your moods, I think it does make it so much easier. And then like just in terms of resources that I found to be very helpful and educational, I really love the Huberman Lab podcast. And so he has an entire episode on bipolar specifically. And that is a really great, just to educate, like it's a great episode. The other thing that really helped me once I had my diagnosis, I read a book called An Unquiet Mind by Kay Jamison. And she's actually a psychiatrist, but also diagnosed with bipolar. So very interesting perspective and a great writer. Like she has a lot of different books. But that book made me feel so like seen and understood in a way that I hadn't felt before. So I think even just seeking those supports that make you feel understood. Because like I said before, I think one of the loneliest things about living with something like bipolar is you do not feel understood by the people around you. And that can be extremely frustrating. But if you can seek sources of feeling understood, whether it's like a support group or books, movies, documentaries, anything that kind of validates your experience, I've found to be extremely healing. And then the other thing that really helped me was doing my DBT courses. And you don't have to do like the course. There's a whole handbook that you can just buy online by Marsha Linehan. But DBT skills are basically just, they help you with emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal relationships, and I forget the other one, but just such a great resource. And DBT was actually designed for borderline personality disorder. And at the time, that's what I thought I had. But I think it can truly be applied to anyone that's struggling with mental health. And honestly, just anyone in general. Like they're really good skills to have in terms of being able to cope. And yeah, that was very valuable to me.
What does DBT stand for?
So it's dialectical behavioral therapy.
And it's getting you to, if I remember, part of it is that it's recognizing that it's hard to hold two things being that are present, an emotion can be present at a time, that you can be both happy and sad is one aspect of it, correct?
Dialectics is basically just referring to the fact that you can have two opposing truths at the same time, and they're both true. So one of the main ones is, what is it? It's like, I am trying as hard as I can. Like I'm trying my best and I can be better. Yeah, there's a bunch of examples, but I still use those skills. Not all of them, but I still use a lot of them. And specifically for distress tolerance, I find with bipolar, when you're in crisis, it's hard to feel like anything can help with that. But just learning different strategies to get you out of that mind state is really helpful. And now even my partner, he knows these strategies. And so if he can see that I'm spiraling and I'm starting to go into a really dark place, he will say, okay, we need to try this. We need to do some cold exposure. That's one I use all the time. Putting your face in a bowl of ice water. It will literally slow your heart rate and it triggers the dive response. So physiologically, your body immediately calms down. And I do that all the time. Like even in the winter, if I'm feeling super escalated, I will walk out into the snow with bare feet and just try to ground myself. I do a lot of cold showers and ice baths, and that's one that I use all the time, and I find it very helpful. But there's so many different examples. And there's also a podcast actually called DBT and Me, and it just goes over each skill like one by one. So every episode is a new skill, and I listen to that a lot as well. So that's another great way to access that.
I think what we'll do is at the end of this, we'll put in the show notes just the resources we've talked about that were helpful. I know there was another psychiatrist that was on YouTube really talking about the diagnoses, about medication, and you had shared that with us as a way to help us understand the medications, the cycling, and why you have different types of medications, what this will mean, what you were actually tracking and what you were trying to understand and figure out. So you also shared, I can't remember, it's still on my list, so I see it all the time, I'm subscribed, but I can't remember her name, but we'll put those in because I think if I can say the things that are the most important that I have learned as a parent trying to support you is, I think, recognizing that I think you do start with some of the 4 pillars. Have you been sleeping? Are you eating? Are you exercising? Are you connecting? Are you feeling really isolated? And you can support those ways. And when you're hearing, like it's the pattern for us that changed it, because we started also seeing a pattern. And I think then as parents, I would now sooner go and get help. I would actually now go to a psychologist right away myself as a parent and saying, this is what's happening. How can we support? What does this look like? And even at that time, if you do have supports with your job that you can access some supports, that's what I would also choose from a parental perspective of how we could help you. And I think even listening to some of these, reading some of these books, listening to some of these podcasts would be helpful. We also had a book on borderline personality that helped us because it gave us a process to help you process when you came to us.
Mm-hmm.
But that was part of it. And I think that's an important piece is recognizing for us, it wasn't about parents. And it's always that, isn't it always that in our lives? Like even when you're in a relationship with your partner, it's not about you. What can take you out of the equation and how can we move forward? And how can we move forward to support this person in front of you that you're trying to love? And more than anything, we wanted to do something quick so that you didn't feel this pain. And we weren't able to. And it was a real process to recognize how to change our behaviors to support you, and that this was your journey and yours alone, as life often is. And as a parent, how can we hold you, love you, and help you move forward in this? And it's so beautiful to see you today. You're going back to nursing. You are in a healthy relationship. You're in healthy relationships with your family, with so many people. Like you are thriving with a diagnosed mental illness. And you didn't think this was possible.
Yeah.
And now you are thriving. You are doing well. It doesn't mean that you live a perfect life. It means that you're thriving and able to manage.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point to touch on, especially from a parent or loved one's perspective, and even for myself. And I forget this, but there is no cure. So, like, for example, bipolar is a chronic illness. There is no cure. You can be treated and it can bring stability, but I have to remind myself that I'm not cured. And there were so many times along my journey where I would become stable and then maybe manic, and I felt like I was cured, and it just happened over and over again. And then I would go off my meds because I thought I don't need these anymore. But I just have to constantly remind myself that no, this is a forever thing. I will live with this forever. I found a good medication combination, so I found stability. But I was even saying the other day, I still have moments, like I have to take meds twice a day. And it's just a kind of a constant reminder that this is something that I live with, even though I feel normal. And so right now, like I feel normal, I feel stable. And it does always cross my mind, like, do I need to be taking 6 pills a day? But you hear that all the time in people with bipolar, how it's very tempting to go off of your meds, but then it's like that's what's keeping you well, basically. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, I think obviously healing is not linear. So I always have the perspective now that it's not if I will become depressed again, it's more like when. And I feel like I'm better prepared for it now. So I think now I can recognize if I'm in that state that it will not last forever. And that is the biggest thing, because when you're in it, you feel like it's forever. You feel like there's no hope. It's never getting better, but it doesn't last forever. And so I think that's a really important reminder that I always tell myself. But yeah. And I think we just have to treat mental illness more like a physical illness, because it is invisible, but it can be just as life-threatening as any chronic condition. And unfortunately, it's just not treated like that in healthcare. And a lot of people die because they don't receive the treatment that they need. And there are all these barriers in place. I feel lucky in the sense that I have a healthcare background and was probably able to navigate things easier than some people. I also have a lot of good supports. Like I have a very supportive family. So I feel lucky in that sense. I just think about all those people that don't have those things and how hard it would be for them to get the help that they need.
We look in our society, many of in our penitentiaries and jails, those living on the streets. You once said to us, I know that without the support of the family, that would be me right now. I would not have been able to continue this life without the support that we have. So I think that's another important piece as I look, is recognizing it is not linear. So this is a journey. It's a lifetime journey. And it's not, oh, here's the magic solution that's going to fix it all. It's just a small incremental step to the right approach, the right team that you have for your mental health team, the right support you have around you with family and loved ones, and recognizing and giving hope. I think a huge piece I remember when you read that book is the hope. You needed hope. You needed hope out there that you could live with a diagnosis, that you could be past where you were. Because in the process of getting the diagnosis and therefore the correct medications that you needed at times felt hopeless. And how do you get there? And I think that was another thing as a loved one, is just that continuing to support, to look, to explore, and to reach out to different people. You had different support groups you connected with, and it helped you hear other people's story, not only to affirm your own, but then to also learn about these people and who they connected with, what they read, what they listened to, the medications they were on. So the shared stories, because it's not one size fits all. It's not, oh, if you hear Jayna's story, you have this, get what she has, it's going to fix everything. It's not that. Everybody, like you say, responds to what care they need, what medications they need differently. And so it really is talking about it and reaching out and exploring and wondering and being curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I actually wrote down a quote from that book, from An Unquiet Mind by Kay Jamison. But I just wanted to read this actually, because it's the last page of her book. But I think it's so hopeful. Like, it really paints bipolar specifically in a positive light. And I just resonate with it so much. So she says, I believe that as a result of my illness, I have felt more things more deeply, had more experiences more intensely, loved more and been loved more, laughed more often for having cried more often, appreciated the springs more for all the winters, worn death close, and therefore appreciated being alive more. And it's just, like, when I think about framing it in a positive way, I always tell myself, like, how lucky I am to be able to experience the full magnitude of human emotion. And I think that as physical beings here on earth, that's what we're here to do. Like, we're here to have this human experience and feel these emotions and go through really hard times and have times of joy. But I do feel lucky to have experienced the full depth of every possible human emotion that there is. And also just, I know that it's made me more resilient, more strong as a person. It's connected me with my family more. It's something that I think I will take, and in this lifetime, I will use it to help others. And I think if you can find like meaning and purpose within that, it just makes it so much easier to live with.
Jayna, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing your story, for sharing some practical tips and strategies for moving forward, and sharing the hope and just sharing your vulnerability. And I'm so glad we were able to talk about this and share it with everybody else. So I want to thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's a very important thing to talk about openly and just continue this conversation and dialogue. And yeah, it was an honor to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And for my listeners, until next time, keep leading with your soul.
That wraps up another episode of the Lead with Your Soul podcast. I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. As you navigate your own life transitions, remember to be gentle with yourself and embrace the journey. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. Join me next week for more insights and inspiration. Until next time, keep leading with your soul.